A strange letter that for which it had trusted to Maria wiped memories of the dinner from our minds. Maria was repeatedly barraged with questions by Aunt Rosa and the other parents. It became increasingly ill-tempered when they refused to believe her. If we kids tried to butt in, they'd probably ignore us. Our parents were all stirred up, firing back and forth about the gold and the distribution of the assets, and completely forgetting that we were even there. I'd already guessed that they'd been talking like this in the shadows, but I hadn't thought they'd be so blunt. It gave all of us kids a considerable shock. From what we could overhear, all the parents wanted more money as soon as possible. Back and forth about grandfather's inheritance, back and forth about the distribution of gold if it was found, and about advance payments and cash. It was so despicable that I could hardly bear to watch, even though one of them was my father. It was like Jessica felt the same way. We left our seat without being asked and went to hang out somewhere well away from our parents.
なるほどな。じいさまが飯の席にも顔を出したくない理由がよーくわかったよ。うちの親たちにはすっかり幻滅だぜ。金だの遺産だの。よくもまああそこまで大っぴらに。
俺の場合はクソ親父に幻滅しきってるからよ。これ以上評価の下がりようがないぜ。
そんなの私だって同じだぜ。しかし今夜のには呆れたぜ。心底呆れたぜ。
Jessica looked down at the floor, irritated. She was already talking about how bad her parents were, but maybe she hadn't really felt that way deep inside. The depth of Jessica's shock made that clear.
未成年の君たちはご両親に養育してもらってるからわからないだろうけど、お金を得るというのは単純な綺麗事じゃないよ。未成年である今にそれを理解しろとは言わない。でもご両親なりに何かの努力をしていることだけは認めてあげてほしいな。
やれやれ。ジョージの兄貴は人間ができてるぜ。
ジョージ兄さんは社会人になってバリバリ働いてるけどよ。金とか財産とかそういう話になったらうちの親父たちみたいに強欲むき出しのハゲタカになれるってのかよ。
自分だけの話だったらそんなことはしたくないよ。でも家族や社員、部下やその家族の生活を背負ったら戦わなければならない時もあるかもしれない。
私はそんな戦い嫌だぜ。小さまの遺産がどうのこうのなんて話、ヘドが出るぜ。
Jessica pretended to spit violently. That harsh reaction made the depths of her pain very clear.
もうこの話はやめようぜ。じいさまの隠し黄金がどうのこうの、財産だ遺産だって話は親たちの問題で俺たちの問題じゃないさ。
僕も同感だよ。せめて気を利かせて親たちの話し合いを邪魔しないのが子供の務めだと思うね。
なんだか面白くねえぜ。
Everyone knows the phrase, adults are filthy. But we had seen that for ourselves, and that really did give us a considerable shock. George was now pretty much an adult, and I had already been disillusioned by my dad, so the shock wasn't that big for us. But Jessica seemed to be taking it hard. Apparently she'd received a bigger blow than I'd thought. She always talked badly about her parents, but it looks like she hadn't changed at all on the inside. Even now she's still a pure-hearted, delicate person who can't doubt others. I'm sure she respected her parents as much as anyone else does. And then her parents started raging about going money, inheritance, my money, right in front of all of us, the other parents and of the children. It's no surprise she received such a shock from hearing that.
ジェシカちゃん、どうかお父さんとお母さんのことを嫌いにならないで。理解しろとまでは言わないから、せめてどうか嫌いにならないであげて。
分かって てるよ。少し放っておいてくれよ。
6 years ago, I would have kept taunting Jessica even after she got all dejected. But I guess I really have grown over the last 6 years. I realised it'd be better to leave Jessica alone right now. Jessica suddenly looked away sulkily and left the parlour. She probably wanted to be alone for a while. I could not do nothing but wordlessly watch her back as she left.
そういえばマリアちゃんはどこに行ったんだろ
多分まだ肖像画の前でいじけてるんだろうぜ。
Maria truly looked up to witches, and she'd expected that coming in direct contact with Beatrice when receiving their letter as proof would surprise everyone and make them happy. However, the adults had doubted its authenticity, thoroughly bombarding Maria with questions and refusing to accept her story. Even for me, it wasn't hard to imagine how much that must have hurt Maria. We couldn't speak to Maria or Jessica. In the end, George and I just abandoned ourselves to the sound of falling rain in the dark night.
う。台風はどんな感じなんだろうね。ニュースをやってないかな。
George started walking over to the corner of the parlour where the television was. He hadn't called me over, but I really couldn't care less where the typhoon was on the sea now. So getting over there to the television, I loitered around the window.
そんなに風は出てなさそうだけど、海の上はひどいのかしらね。天気予報では暴風警報も聞いてたんだけど。
桐江さんか。大人たちの積もる話はどんな感じなんすか？
She seemed to catch the sarcasm. Huey shrugged.
この胃の痛くなる話は徹夜で続くのかしら。嫌になるわ。
まあせいぜいよろしく。じいさまの財産分配についてハゲタカごっこをお楽しみくださいってんだ。最低の気分だぜ。
それに関しては同感よ。バトラ君みたいに席が外せるなら私もそうしたいわ。でもそうもいかない。たとえ発言権がなくてもね。パートナーも大変よ。
Huey took a deep breath and smiling bitterly. That's right. They probably wouldn't let Huey speak, since she's only married into the family. Still, as Dad's partner, she had no choice but to stay by his side and support him. She's probably had to bear the full brunt of his mental pressure much more than me. I wasn't going to apologize, but I realized that I'd spoken too harshly. I cut the sarcasm for the time being.
どんな感じなんすか？相変わらず謎の魔女ベアトリーチェの話題で持ちきりですか？
まあね。あの人たちはおじいさまが亡くなった時の遺産分配について兄弟4人で話をまとめようとずっと密約を重ねてきた。そこへ未知の5人目が現れて話をややこしくしようっていうんだから穏便な話のわけもないわ。互いを罵り合ったりかと思えば共闘しようってことになったり。夏日姉さんでなくても頭痛がしてくるところよ。
On one hand, they all want a larger portion than the other siblings, so they're all rivals. But on the other hand, they don't want 1 yen to be snatched up by the other than anyone other than the siblings, so they're all allies. I hadn't been told the details, but the siblings were apparently discussing how to protect their shares under various situations, setting up ceasefire agreements and rules to prevent anyone from getting an unfair advantage, even preparing to resort to legal action if absolutely necessary. That would go this far to preserve their shares, was so beyond disgusting that you had to acknowledge their resilience.
ってことはさしずめベアトリーチェはじいさまからの資格ってとこですかね。自分抜きで遺産の分配なんて話を勝手に進めてた息子たちに一泡吹かせたかったんだろうぜ。
何者かしらね、ベアトリーチェって。自称してることが全て本当なら今日まで誰にも知られずにいた謎の人物で、しかもおじいさまの隠し黄金の存在を知っていて、その上当主の指輪まで委ねられている。相当に信頼された人物ね。
さすがにほうきにまたがった魔女だとは思わないっすけど、でも魔女と呼ぶに値する怪人物であることは間違いないっすね。
マリアちゃんがそのあたりのことを詳しく話してくれればいいのだけど、みんな小さい子にがっつきすぎだわ。すっかり怯えてしまって聞けるものも聞けなくなってしまった。あの人たち北風と太陽とか読んだことないのかしら。
確かなのはマリアがベアトリーチェと名乗る人物から手紙を受け取ったこと。自分で現れて直接話せばいいものを、手紙を託して今もどこかに身を潜めているっていうシャイな怪人物ですけどね。
ねえバトラ君、ベアトリーチェなんて人物が本当にいると思う？
さあ、あくまでも偽名じゃないっすかね。じいさまの代理人としてその妄想の中の魔女の名を名乗ることを許されたとか。
そうじゃなくて、今この六軒島には全部で18人いるの。19人目が存在すると思う
Are there really a full 18 people on this island right now? One thing about that, I began counting on my fingers, and it really did come out to that many.
19人目が存在すると思うって、どういう意味っすか？
言葉通りの意味よ。マリアちゃんに傘を貸した人物は私たち18人の中にはいないらしい。なら19人目がいて、その人物がマリアちゃんに傘を貸したと思うのが妥当じゃない？
ま、そうなりますね。
ならその人物は今どこにいるの？少なくとも雨が降り出した瞬間には島にいた。そしてその後はどんどん天気は悪化して、とても船なんか出せない状態となれば、その人物はまだ島の中にいて、どこかで雨宿りをしていなくてはならない。私たち誰の目にも触れずね。
確かに俺たちは屋敷やゲストハウスの中を勝手にうろつき回ってましたが、誰も19人目なんかには会ってないわけですよね。でもまあこれだけの広さのある島ですし、屋敷やゲストハウス以外に雨宿りできるところだってあるのかも。
At about this time, I began to realize what direction Kiri found suspicious were taking in. Kiri was denying that a 19th person existed. Beatrice was one of us 18. In other words, she thought someone we knew well was tricking us.
ベアトリーチェが自称する通りなら、その人物は間違いなく最高の賓客よ。おじい様が信頼する最高の腹心。そんな人物をおじい様が歓待しないわけがない。お屋敷に迎え入れないわけはないのよ。でも私たちは誰も見ていない。
待ってくださいよ。それはちょいと性急な推理じゃないですか？確かに誰の目にも触れてはいないけれど、だからって19人目を否定することにはならないんじゃないですか？何かの理由があってこっそり上陸してずっと隠れているのかも。悪魔の証明ってやつっすよ。いることを証明するのはたやすい。ベアトリーチェってやつが俺たちの前に現れて挨拶すりゃ解決する。でも19人目がいないことを証明するのは不可能っすよ。
バトラ君の推理の仕方は悪くないわ。現在の状況では19人目の存在を認めるにも否定するにも情報が足りない。でもね、チェス盤をひっくり返して考えると、ほぼ19人目はありえないって断言できちゃうのよ。
Binge the chessboard around was one of Kiri's favourite phrases. I've been influenced by those words and used them myself from time to time. When you get stuck trying to find a move in chess or shogi, then try spinning the board around and looking at everything from your opponent's standpoint. You can often see a strategy that will give you the upper hand. That means turning things around and putting yourself in your opponent's shoes.
いい？仮に19人目の人物としてベアトリーチェが実在したとして、その人物は誰にも知られることなくこっそりとこの島に上陸し、ずっと隠れていた。何かの理由があってね。ならどうしてわざわざ姿を現してマリアちゃんに手紙を渡したの？
It really was a contradiction. If they had some reason for hiding themselves, then they should have stayed hidden the whole time. But even so, they appeared openly in front of Maria.
それは
Well, they could have been fully aware that nobody would accept Maria's saying there's a witch.
ほらマリアも言ってた。メッセンジャーにされたって言ってたじゃないですか。マリアが一番年下で素直そうだったからじゃ。
メッセンジャーなんて必要なの？手紙を親族会議の席上に送りたかったら郵送すればいいだけの話よ。4人の兄弟全員に郵送すれば黙殺することもできない。手紙を持参してこっそり手渡す理由がないのよ。
確かになんだかおかしな話っすね。
そもそもベアトリーチェが存在していて、その存在をアピールしたいならみんなの前に堂々と姿を現せばいいだけの話なのに、現れずマリアちゃんという小さな子を通しておぼろげな輪郭だけでその存在を主張しようとする曖昧さ、矛盾。もっと考えて。マリアちゃんの前に姿を現し19人目の存在を印象づけるという点と、にもか今この瞬間も私たちの前に姿を現さず隠れ続けている点、これらの矛盾、これを念頭に置いた上でチェス盤をひっくり返すの。つまり19人目の人物としてベアトリーチェがいると印象づけたい人物の目論見は何かよ。
姿を隠したい人物ならその存在をアピールするわけがない。
Delay us. If they made their presence known and properly known to everyone, then everyone would have no reason to doubt that the riddle exists. Doubt what's going on and would present with the riddle. However, they need people to actually participate in the riddle, so they needed to be known but not seen. So they went to Maria, who could be distrusted.
そして姿を現したい人物なら手紙を託すなんて遠回しをするわけがない。ってことは
簡単よ。ベアトリーチェは18人の中にいるのよ。だからこそ18人以外の人物が存在するような幻想を作り出しているのよ。これ見よがしな19人目のアピール。
Of course, the reason why she'd need to have people solve the riddle in the first place doesn't really help.
それで得をするのは姿を潜めた19人目じゃない。すでにいる18人の方なのよ。もちろんこの推理は穴だらけ。いくつかの前提がひっくり返るだけですぐに崩れる脆いものだけど、私はほぼ間違いないと見てるわ。
This is starting to feel pretty creepy. Someone lent Maria an umbrella and handed her the letter. Supposedly none of the 18 did this, yet Beatrice was hidden among those 18. What was this person planning, hiding their true form from and pretending to be Beatrice?
マリアちゃんの自作自演も疑ったんだけど、文章の内容が非常に手が込んでて、マリアちゃんが自前で用意したとは考えがたい。
Maria is the witch. Case closed. We've done it.
でもマリアちゃんが何者かと共謀している可能性も否定できないわ。
おいおい、マリアは9歳のお子様だぜ。誰と何を共謀するってんだよ。しかも愚直で真面目で素直なあの性分だぜ。
ええ、 私もマリアちゃんの性分はよく理解しているわ。でもだからこそあり得ると思うの。魔女に憧れ、その存在を盲信している夢見がちな少女。そこにベアトリーチェと名乗る人物が現れて魔女だと名乗ったら、彼女はそれを大喜びで鵜呑みにして信じるんじゃないかしら。
つまりあの肖像画のごついドレスを着て変装すればマリアを騙すことは難しくないと。
その論法になっちゃうと、私たち女性陣はみんな疑われちゃうことになるんだけどね。とにかくマリアちゃんが何者に出会ったのか、それの詳細を聞くことがこの謎を解く一番にして最も身近な鍵なのよ。
Now, Fury would be the most suspicious person of that, because she doesn't have someone who can vouch for her during the time.
しかしその鍵は少女の心の奥に堅くなに閉ざされてしまったわ。みんなが頭ごなしに魔女の存在を否定し、一体その人物は誰なのかと問い詰めすぎた。マリアちゃんは当分大人には心を開かないでしょうね。
In the dim hall in front of the portrait of Beatrice, Maria was sobbing.
誰もね、マリアがベアトリーチェに会ったことを信じてくれない。ベアトリーチェとくれた手紙も見せたのに、それでも信じてくれないの。
とにかく鍵はマリアちゃんが握ってるわ。ベアトリーチェが18人の中にいるのか19人目なのか、それを知る鍵をね。
マリアは頑固だぜ。あいつへそを曲げるとなかなか機嫌を直さないからな。
大人の私より子供のバトラ君の方が機嫌を直せる確率は高そうよ。彼女の機嫌が直ったら聞いてみて。遺産分配がどうのこうのって話には関心ないけど、こんな王道洋館ミステリーみたいなシチュエーションにはワクワクしちゃわない？マリアちゃんに手紙を渡した人物は一体誰なのか。知的好奇心がうずくわ。
うんざりするような金の話に付き合わされてもワクワクとは実にタフなことだぜ。大人はすげえや。
I shrugged expressedly. I did notice something. Kiri noticed how dejected I was after overhearing our parents' turbulent discussion, and was probably trying to clear up the air. At very least I'd recovered enough to voice my complaints. She wasn't my real mother, but so I never felt like calling her mom. But it did make me think that she's a real adult.
おうガキども、ここにいたのか。キリエも長え化粧直しじゃねえか。俺も次からは化粧をしてくることにするぜ。
ごめんなさい。女の化粧は長いのよ。どう？兄弟水入らずの話し合いは。
さぞや和気あいあいとしてるだろうよ。
Kiri poked the weak spot under my arm with her elbow.
一度頭を冷やそうってことで小休止さ。こりゃ夜通しになりそうだぜ。泣けてくれ。
His way of talking hadn't changed, but he couldn't completely hide his fatigue. I couldn't say I was sympathetic, but he looked pitiful compared to his normal energetic self.
しかしひでえ雨だな。ゲストハウスに戻るのも嫌になるぜ。夏日姉さんが屋敷で泊まれるよう準備してくれたらしい。どうする
？3階になった時に考えてもいいんじゃない？部屋に戻る体力もなくなってたら その時はお世話になりましょうよ。
そうだな。その時に考えりゃいいか。バトラーはどうする？
俺がいちゃお邪魔だろうからよ。気使って向こうに戻るぜ。
そうか。すぐ戻るのか？
さあな。一人で戻ったって寂しいしよ。子供全員で揃って帰ることにするぜ。
そうだな。そうするといい。それで、バトラー、お前、今夜はそうは簡単には寝ないだろう。
多分、いとこたちとおしゃべりしてるだろうからな。夜更かししそうな気配はあるぜ。それがどうかしたのかよ。
そうか。もし、大人たちの会議が終わってお前がまだ起きてたら、ちょいと家族でしたい話があるんだ。
なんだよ。柄にもねえな。
I don't like where that's going. That's a death flag. Apparently Kiryu was thinking the same thing. What are you talking about? She asked him in a small voice. It looked like Kiryu didn't have a clue what Dad meant either.
キリエにも聞いてもらいたい話だ。後で話すから、今は聞くな。頼む。
I don't know anyone who neglected the concept of family as much as this old bastard. Now that he's saying he's going to have a talk with us as a family. Both Kiryu and I couldn't help but get wide-eyed.
そうビビった顔すんなよ。ビビりてえのは俺の方なんだ。何しろ。
At this point he swallowed his words for an instant. Even though putting on airs of importance wasn't too much like my dad.
気持ち悪いぜ、親父。今、家族は全員揃ってるじゃねえかよ。もったいぶらずに言えよ。
俺は多分、今夜、殺されるだろうな。
That's a bigger death flag. There was a crash of thunder. It must have been really close. Dad's expression, briefly illuminated by the lightning, was burned into my eyes. Dad's face, which always looked so sure of himself and always wore a taunting expression, was strangely pale in a way I couldn't really explain. It was so worn out that he looked like a different person.
は何言ってんだよ、柄でもね。
同感よ。どうしたの？急に弱気ね。あなたらしくもない。
俺も化粧直しに行ってくる。ついてくんなよ。
Dad turned away weakly. After that, only Kiryu and I were left, still wide-eyed.
なんだってんだ？今夜殺される？まさか、あの妙な手紙のせいで、親父ビビっちまったのか？連続殺人者の映画の見過ぎだぜ。
Kiryu didn't answer my light-hearted words and continued to stare at Dad's disappearing back.
バトラ君はルドルフさんに今話せと言ったら話さず立ち去った。みんなに話すことがあると言い出しながら答えなかった。どうして？チェス盤をひっくり返す。すると
話すと言っておきながら話せない矛盾。なんすかね。親父側から見ると何か見えてきますか？
ええ、見えるわよ。話したいことがある。でも自分から言い出す勇気がない。だから追ってきて俺に話しかけて聞き出してくれが正解ね。ついてくるなも逆の意味よ。ついてきて俺を問い詰めてくれが正解。まったく甘えん坊さんなんだから。
そういう推理でいいんすか？そんなんめちゃくちゃな。
名探偵や名刑事が男女の気持ちや心を推理できる？できないでしょ？異性の気持ちを探るのは何次元のトリックを暴くよりはるかに高度な技術なのよ。私に言わせれば名作推理小説より恋愛小説の方が よっぽど難解なミステリーなんだから。
はあ、そういうもんすかね。
私はあの甘えん坊さんと一緒にいるわ。普段は虚勢を張ってるけど、今夜はかなりの激論で疲れ切ってる。誰かに寄りかかりたい気持ちなんでしょうね。それに応えるのがパートナーの役目よ。
はあ、そりゃお熱いことで。じゃあ、うちのクソ親父の世話をよろしく頼みますよ。
ええ、任せておいて。
I called out to Kiri's departing back.
何？
いや、ありがとよって。おかげで、陰鬱な気分がだいぶ晴れたぜ。
ならよかった。コミュニケーションは大事ね。
After answering with a wink, Kiri followed after Dad. Natsui could be found in a dimly lit hallway. Now and then the thunder would crash, but it had no effect on Natsui's expression. She looked completely worn out. The discussion that had just taken between the relatives in the dining hall was repeating itself inside Natsui's mind. Beatrice had proclaimed that, in addition to the gold, all of the inheritance and property of the Ushima family would be given to the person who could solve the riddle. In other words, she planned to undermine the absolute guarantee that Kraus, the older brother, had to succeed the head family. Originally, the other siblings had no chance to inherit the headship. To them, this proposal by Beatrice was extremely desirable. It was obvious that they would have accepted it. There was no need to play some clumsy detective game. Natsui knew that the so-called 19th-person Beatrice couldn't exist. Naturally, Beatrice was nothing more than a fictional character used to pass a message that Kinzo had written himself. As proof, Kinzo had remained stubbornly neutral as to the letter's authenticity. He was completely ignoring these reckless claims that he shouldn't ignore, but he had given up the head's ring. In short, Kinzo had wordlessly admitted that the letter held his own message. Most likely, one of the servants had given Mario the ring. Kinzo probably worked out an elaborate plan where the dress from the portrait would be prepared, and someone, probably Shannon, would be made to wear it and deliver the letter with the umbrella. By doing that, he could make it seem like the witch from the portrait actually existed. Now, if anything, that alone would be proof that Kinzo was behind all of this. In that case, it was the same Kinzo trying to butt in on the siblings' private discussion. Then Kinzo, by announcing that he had given everything to the person who solved the riddle, would weaken Kraus's overwhelming advantage. Now it was certain. Kinzo had eavesdropped on the siblings' discussion of the parley earlier today, so he had known how Kraus had staved off the attack by the other three, and to make the scales of the battle go into balance, he had sent out this strange letter, which benefited Kraus's rivals. He was trying to push this crazy theory that Rosa, who had a weak position among siblings of her age, would join with Eva and Rudolph. Then, we're on a 3-1 advantage, they'd be able to overwhelm Kraus yet again and make their ridiculous theories get accepted by force. And by doing that, he gave them the power to resettle what had always nearly been decided conflict. They now had started repeatedly pressing Kraus to pay them a large sum of money. Using the condition that all the siblings guaranteed Kraus's position as a successor, talk about advance payments being brought up again despite having rejected once. Of course, even without the story about the hidden gold, the Ushima family's store of wealth was vast. That store of wealth alone was more than enough. Even though the hidden gold was buried along with Kinzo's death, there would be more than enough money to satisfy. Therefore, if there wasn't enough interest in the gold itself, Kinzo had managed to instill the lifelong fear that, on the off chance that someone found the gold, that person would be guaranteed the headship. And this kind of Achilles heel would definitely be taken advantage of by someone sooner or later. The only person with this fatal weakness was the successor, Kraus. The other siblings had found, No, they had been told by Kinzer that something only Kraus could lose, and they had thoroughly taken advantage of that. Natsui, Kraus' only ally in this painful position, and his wife wanted to fight alongside him. She kept trying to explain to him that the existence of the gold itself was a farce and there was no need for him to compromise. Kraus had always told Natsui, he had told all of the siblings, he always said that the hidden gold was nothing more than an illusion created by Kinzo. Therefore, Natsui had believed as his wife and had supported her husband on that foundation. Even so, Natsui's words didn't reach Kraus. Even though Natsui had fought so hard and lent all of her strength, he continued to fight by himself and was trying to compromise with the other 3 siblings. Natsui sadly and weakly wondered why she could have not been of use to him and started getting angry. It had happened when everyone decided to take a short break to cool their heads. Natsui had flared up against Kraus. Enraged, she could only say she had asked why she could not have been useful to him. He had told her that he wanted to talk about something and invited her into a room that she was normally not allowed to enter. That room was sealed with a heavy-looking padlock, and looking at it gave her an uncomfortable feeling.
他の3人の言うことも、ベアトリーチェを名乗る不審人物の言うことも、何も気にかけることはありません。黄金など所詮はお父様が生み出したまやかし。それを見つけられることなどあるわけがない。あなたが跡継ぎであることは盤石です。何を恐れることがあるのです。
Kraus removed the padlock on the door. He then motioned to Natsui to enter.
入りたまえ。
何ですか？
見せたいものがある。君に初めて見せるものだ。
Natsui timidly opened the door with a dubious expression on her face. It was pitch black. She searched for a switch to turn on the lights, but since this was her first time in the room, she didn't know where it was. Kraus entered behind her, pushing her in, and when he closed the door before turning on the lights, the two swallowed up by the darkness. Only the sound of Kraus locking the door rang through the dark.
これは何事ですか？明かりは？
今つける。待ちたまえ。
Just as he said, when Kraus pushed a switch on the wall, a flickering light turned on and lit up the room.
それは。
Natsui had her breath taken away. The room had no windows, and at a glance it appeared to be empty. In the middle room with a small round table had been set, and there was a bright lights brightened only the table as if it were a leading part of a play. On the top of the table, a red tablecloth of elaborate design had been set out covered in dust, and on top of that, something on the side of a grown man's arm had been set down. That something took Natsui's breath away.
凄まじい純度を持つ黄金のインゴットだよ。こいつがなければ誰も黄金伝説を信じはしなかった。
It was an ingot of solid gold. Even in the faint light, it sparkled with a noble and dignified glint.
こいつはまともなインゴットじゃない。このインゴットを鋳造したのが国内なのか国外なのか、それすらも私にはわからないんだ。
It took a high level of skill to make the purest of solid gold ingots, and in order to verify that purity, it was a standard that the original foundry and the name of the bank that guaranteed it was imprinted on the gold. However, the ingot did not have that kind of seal. This was a mysterious gold bar that came from an unknown foundry.
ここを見たまえ。怯えることはない。こいつはただの金塊だ。
Natsui, following Kraus's words, timidly approached the ingot.
そこだ。
Kraus pointed to the surface of the ingot. Natsui concentrated on that section. Right there was a thin print of the one-winged eagle's crest. Natsui's breath was taken away once again.
そうだよ。これこそが、親父がベアトリーチェに与えられたといい、保証人のマルソーの会長に任意で一つを抜き取らせて持ち帰らせ。
財界のフィクサーたちを信用させたという伝説のインゴットなのだよ。方々に手を尽くして私が見つけた。他の兄弟たちより早くね。
そんな。じゃあお父様の黄金伝説は。
実在する。後ろ宮金蔵が授けられたベアトリーチェの黄金は実在。
そんな。本当にあるなんて。
Natsui was shocked. Kraus had always said that Kinzo's gold was but a fabrication, so she had believed it as his wife. However, reality was different. Since he had definite proof, he had been more than certain of any other siblings that the legend of the gold was true. Because of this, Kraus was deeply frightened by the possibility that someone other than himself would find the gold he'd failed to find, costing him everything. But to Natsui, the truth was more than enough to split open her heart. She had thought that as Kraus' wife, she would be his closest confidant, which was why she had selfishly supported him. Selflessly. And yet, he had hid the fact from her until today. Why?
そこまでに私はあなたの信頼に足りないというのですか。
そういうつもりはない。話す必要がなかっただけだ。
あなたにとっては妻はその程度のものなのですか。
落ち着きたまえ。劇場にすぐ駆られるのは君の悪い癖だ。
あなたがそうさせてるんじゃないですか。私は後宮家に嫁ぎ、今日まであなたの妻として仕えてきました。あなたのために生まれた家を捨て、身も心も捧げてお仕えしてきました。その報いがこれなんですか。そんなことって。
Kraus grimaced, looking annoyed. His expression was effectively communicated how much he disliked this part of Natsui, even if he didn't say it out loud.
私はもうあなたの力になれそうもありません。
うん。それでいい。兄弟のトラブルを私が自分の力で解決する。君の力は借りんよ。
違います。これは後宮家のトラブルです。確かに私にはこの身に家紋を刻むことが許されていません。でもあなたの妻です。なのに私には力添えする資格もないのですか。あなた。
君を思えばこそあえて関わらせなかったのだ。これ以上は頭痛に障るだろう。君は今夜はこれで休みたまえ。兄弟の話は兄弟でつける。君は関係ない。それだけだ。
A dull headache tormented Natsui. No matter what medicine she took, no matter the scent she burned, it wouldn't heal. In fact, simply wandering alone in dark corridors and listening to a sound of rain seemed to be a better cure. I may be Natsui, but I was never Ushiromaya Natsui. I've been despised and treated as a borrowed room and insulted when I couldn't even fill that role, even though I've tried to properly perform my duties as a wife. But now even my husband rejects me. I've done my best raising my daughter as if it were the last job left to me. However, I've had no release for my anger and sadness, and they've caused me subconsciously to strain that relationship too. Because I've been extensively strict with Jessica's education, she dislikes me thoroughly. She despises me for having no interest in anything but grades. There is no longer anything I can do for the issue of my family. No, that's not good. Despite all that, I must help my husband and beat back the schemes of the other greedy siblings. The head family won't be around much longer. Eventually Kraus will succeed as head, and the next successor will be Jessica. Strictly speaking, the man who enters the family by marrying Jessica will be the next head, but it all comes to the same thing. I have to make Jessica an excellent successor whom everyone will accept as worthy to take over the Ushuramiya family. In the days to come, that greedy Ushuramiya Eva will probably be plotting to find some fault in the main family, and if all goes as she plans, Jessica will be dragged down from the succession with George set up in her place. It is regrettable, but George is a man and even more has matured as a person, compared to Jessica, who is right in the middle of her rebellious period, and whose grades are slightly below average. It can be seen as a glance who is more fit to succeed as head. So in order to secure Jessica's position, I have to turn her into an excellent person. After doing that, I want to find her an excellent husband, worthy of the excellent person she has become. A wonderful man who will truly accept Jessica, and stay with her throughout all of life's joys and sorrows. Was Natsui entrusting her daughter by filling her desire of her own? Natsui thought back to the days where she had no choice but to marry into the Ushuramiya family, because of that unavoidable fate. She had tried to block that from her memory. She had consciously forgotten it and actively attended to the life she'd been given as Ushuramiya Natsui, and in doing so she built a new life. But just now, it felt like all of it had been casually rejected.
何を考えて生きていけばいいのかわからない。
Natsui helplessly rested her head against the glass on the window. The glass, which was cool thanks to raindrops beating against it, felt somehow refreshing, even though it should have been emotionless. Right then it seemed to be the only thing that could understand Natsui. At that point, even if someone appeared, Natsui didn't intend to pay any attention to them. But she did pay attention, because it was her beloved daughter.
母さんか。なんだよ、こんなところに。幽霊かと思ったぜ。
Just as, like always, her words were rough and not at all like a girl's. Instinctively, words of rebuke rose to Natsui's throat. However, their strength gave out and they didn't escape her lips.
ジェシカ、ごめんね。母さんは頭痛がひどいの。そっとしといてくれる？
そう。
Jessica was seeing her mother in a position of feebleness for the first time, so she was considerably disconcerted. Until just now, she'd been filled with contempt for all of her parents, including her mother, but now those feelings had been completely swept away. Her mother's utterly exhausted face had wiped them all out. In its place, the words of George had told her floated back up in her mind. Our parents are doing their best in their own way, and because their families are counting on them, they can't afford to keep everything pleasant, and have a heavy responsibility to fight. Maybe her mother had been standing around in the dimly lit hallway because no one had tried to understand that in her. Jessica hated her mother, so she had no intention of speaking kindly to Natsu just because she was looking a bit frail. So when she attempted to speak kind to her mother anyway, she had to clench her fists and gave up the words from deep in her heart.
ずいぶん立て込んだ話をしてるようじゃん。
お前には関係あります。よそへ行っていなさい。
頭痛ひどい？私、薬もらってこようか。
構わないで結構です。お願いだから、一人きりにして。
Natsui wasn't being cold. She just wanted her daughter to go far away so she wouldn't have to bump against Natsui's own short temper. But there was no chance Jessica would realize this. Jessica hung her head, looking sad. Seeing that expression, Natsui recognized the kindness that Jessica was trying to muster. He gave her a smile to drive her away her own unkind feelings.
じゃあ私、行くよ。大人の邪魔にならないように、いとこたちと一緒にいるから。じゃあ。
お待ちなさい。
She called Jessica, who was trying to leave, and looked lonely, to a stop.
気遣いをありがとう。お前を残して寝込むわけにはいきません。
よせよ。縁起でもないぜ。
心配をかけました。もう大丈夫です。私は行きます。
If I let my daughter see me in this feeble, like this feeble and see me this feeble any longer, I'll only make her feel more uneasy. With that thought in mind, Natsui left Jessica with words of gratitude and made to depart. This time Jessica called out to her mother's back. Natsui stopped and turned around, asking what business Jessica had with her. But Jessica herself didn't know why she stopped her mother, and for a while she smiled wryly, muttering to herself as she hesitated over what to say. She was poking around in her pockets when her hand touched something and she shook it out.
さ、母さん。
Oh, this isn't good.
私さ、今日、お守りもらったんだよ。
So,
なんだっけな。魔除けだったっけ。
Jessica's going to die in that case.
確かその、ドアンノブにぶら下げてるといいんだっけ。忘れちまったぜ。私が持ってても仕方ないし、母さんにあげるよ。
It was a scorpion charm that Maria had given her on the beach. Although she'd heard of its various effects on Maria, Jessica's mind had gone blank and she could barely able to say even that much. Jessica, thinking that her mother probably wouldn't accept it anyway, immediately drew her hand back as she stuck it out, grasping the charm. So when Natsui came back to take it, she was extremely shocked.
これは何かの景品？
まあその、私も多分そうだろうと思ってるけどよ。こんなおもちゃみたいなお守りじゃ、ご利益は期待できねえよな。
But her mother took the charm from her when she grasped it in her hand.
ありがとう。大切にします。ジェシカには今度、私が子供の頃大切にしていたお守りを代わりにあげましょう。
別にそんなつもりで渡すんじゃないぜ。でもまあ、どうしてもって言うなら。
では、私はもう休みます。頭痛がひどいので、ジェシカもあまり夜更かしをしすぎないように。
Natsui put the charm in her pocket and turned away, but she then disappeared into the dark hall.
やっぱり明日も丸一日こんな天気みたいだね。
やれやれ。今日の日中が嘘のようだぜ。
George and I were killing time in front of the parlour television. At that point, Jessica returned. Her face was still blank and it looked like she'd calmed down a bit from when we last saw her.
マリアはまだ肖像画前？
いや、さっき戻ってきて、今はそっちのソファーで寝てるぜ。マリアにはもう遅い時間だもんな。
Looking at the clock, I saw it was little past 10 p.m. Even if we were planning to stay up late at night, it was about time to head back to our room.
一応、うちのおふくろが屋敷にも部屋を用意してくれたんだけどよ。どうする？
僕はゲストハウスに戻りたいかな。親たちの様子を見る限り、僕たちはお屋敷にいない方がいいと思う。
俺も同感だぜ。子供は邪魔せず引っ込んでろって感じみてえだからな。おとなしくそうするさ。
As we were talking about this, Aunt Rosa came into the parlour. She was looking all over, restlessly trying to find Maria.
ローザおばさん。マリアならそこのソファーっすよ。
ありがとう。すっかり眠っちゃってるわね。ベッドに移さないと。
よかったら僕がベッドまで背負っていきましょうか。
ありがとう。助かるわ。ジョージ君たちはゲストハウスに戻るの？それとも
夏日姉さんが用意してくれた部屋に泊まるのかしら。
今話し合ってました。ゲストハウスへ戻ろうかって話になったところです。
そう。なら、マリアも一緒にしてあげてもいいかしら。いとこのみんなと一緒の方が、きっと安心できると思うしね。
Behind both words, she seemed to be concealing some regret that the adults, herself included, had deeply hurt Maria's feelings.
任してくださいよ、おばさん。何しろこっちにゃ、マリアをあやすことに関してはエキスパートがいるっすからね。
それは僕のことかい？僕だけじゃ無理だよ。みんなでだよ。
そうだぜ。バトラだってあんなにもマリアと意気投合してふざけ合ってたじゃねえかよ。
As we said this, Aunt Rosa smiled, looking truly happy.
みんな、ありがとう。私たちの話し合いは、だいぶ遅くまでかかりそう。だから、申し訳ないけど、マリアをみんなにお願いするわ。
おーい、マリア。熟睡か？ゲストハウスに戻るぞ。
Maria muttered something indistinct, rolled over and fell back asleep. It looked like she was sleeping deeply.
すっかり寝込んじゃったようだぜ。起こすのは悪いな。
うん。僕が背負うよ。
Maria's body was much lighter than it looked. I lifted her up and put on George's back. It was raining hard outside and George couldn't hold an umbrella and carry Maria at the same time. It looked like Aunt Rosa would come with us as far as the guest house to help out. However, when she heard Uncle Krause's voice call out to her, she had no choice but to return.
困ったわね。もう戻らないと。
皆さん、ゲストハウスまでお戻りですか？
After we left the hall on the way to the entrance, the door to the servant room opened and Shannon stepped out.
だいぶ暗くなっておりますので、私がご案内させていただきます。
ちょうどよかったわ、シャノちゃん。ジョージ君がマリアをおぶっていてくれるの。傘をさしてあげてくれないかしら。
はい、かしこまりました。
Shannon brought umbrellas for each of us and a flashlight to guide the way. As we opened the front door, downpour was quite terrific. It looked as if we wouldn't have any spare time to take a pleasant walk and enjoy the nighttime rose garden.
兄貴、重くねえか？俺が背負うぜ。
大丈夫だよ。マリアちゃんくらい背負えるよ。
本当にありがとうね。マリアをよろしくお願い。
わかりました。じゃあ、おやすみなさい、おばさん。それでは、お送りしてまいります。
ええ、よろしく。
Aunt Rosa watched us leave.
マリア、いつもごめんね。
Rosa's mumbling voice didn't reach the person in question nor any of the kids, but disappeared beneath the sound of the rain. After cutting through the rainy rose garden, we arrived at the guest house.
俺がマリアを背負って立候補すりゃよかったぜ。そうすりゃ、傘をさしてくれるシャノンちゃんのでっけえお乳を二の腕でたっぷり堪能できたってのによ。
そんなつもりじゃないよ。誤解だよ。
そうしないと、ジョージ様が濡れてしまうと思いまして。ほーら、バカなこと言ってないで入るぜ。
After being urged on by Jessica, we folded up our umbrellas and went into the guest house.
お召し物を濡らしてしまった方はいらっしゃいませんか？タオルを用意いたしますが。
そこまで気を使わなくていいぜ。ありがとよ、シャノンちゃん。
そうだ。僕たちはこれからトランプでもして少し遊ばないかって話なんだけど、よかったら少し一緒しないかい？
あれ、今日のシフト深夜勤は誰になってんだ？
親族会議中は特別シフトになってたと思いました。少し変更も出てるみたいなので、ちょっと確認してきます。
ああ、わざわざ屋敷に戻らないとわからないんなら無理に。
大丈夫です。ゲストハウスの使用人室でわかりますので。ちょっと失礼しますね。
Shannon gave a quick bow and went into the guest house servant room. The rest of us headed to the cousin's room and decided to put Mario in bed for the time being. Mario was sleeping very deeply and there was absolutely no sign of her eyes opening. For now, we'd get some soft drinks out of the room's refrigerator and drink those while playing cards or something.
あれ、カノン君、源氏様までこちらに。今夜のシフトはどうなっているのでしょうか？
クラウス様の命令があってね、シフトの大掛かりな変更があったんだよ。
うん。ゴーダがお屋敷の深夜勤に変更になった。シャノンとカノンはゲストハウスの深夜勤。私と熊沢はゲストハウスに泊まるようにとのご命令だ。お前も今夜はこのままこちらにとどまるよう。たった今電話があった。
ずいぶん大掛かりな変更ですね。お屋敷とゲストハウスの当番がまるっきり逆になってるじゃないですか。
Originally, Shannon and Canon had been assigned to the night shift in the mansion, while the night shift at the guest house, where all of the relatives were staying, would be assigned to Goda, who had an abundance of experience in entertaining. Kumasawa should be sleeping at the guest house, while Genji should be sleeping in the mansion. However, it seemed that Kraus had suddenly ordered the schedule be modified. The shifts of the guest house and mansion had been reversed, and Genji was spending the night in the guest house.
多分ベアトリーチ様の手紙のせいだろうね。
多分ってどうして？
あんな怪しげな手紙が現れたらクラウス様が僕たちを疑うのは当然だからね。親方様直属の僕たちを極力親族会議の席から遠ざけたかったんだろうよ。
Genji, Shannon, and Canon were all permitted to wear the Ushomai family crest of one-winged eagle as the servants who served directly under Kinzo. Of course, they were working for Ushomai family, they had to obey anyone's orders, but their only boss was Kinzo. Since only Kinzo had the right to employ them, even Kraus, who could not have been dismissed of his own accord. Because of this, Kraus and the others often viewed these servants as Kinzo's underlings and shunned them. And in fact, Kinzo seldom let anyone other than them enter his study. This sudden shift change was probably a clear expression of the sense of mistrust that it caused. Considering the time Kinzo had left to live, this would probably be the last family conference before the problem of inheritance came up. On top of that, the mysterious letter claimed to be from Beatrice had dropped in out of the blue. Kraus definitely wanted to keep Kinzo's loyal subjects away from the table as such a delicate and important discussion.
ではすまんが、私は向こうでくつろがせてもらう。もし何かあったらすぐに呼ぶように。今夜のお客様は特別だ。
はい、かしこまりました。源氏様。
Genji nodded back, but one went behind a screen, took off his jacket, and slowly began to relax after a day's worth of tension.
今お戻りになられたのはお子様方？
うん。親族の方々はお屋敷で会議を。だいぶ長引きそうな雰囲気だったかな。
なら気楽だね。これ以上の深夜になって、しかもこの天気。多分親族の皆さんはお屋敷の方のお部屋にお泊まりさ。
多分ね。源氏様がいないから言うけど、ゲストハウス行きになってちょっと嬉しかったかな。
ふん、どうしてだい？意地悪な奥様やエヴァ様から離れられたから？それとも別の理由があるのかい？
別の理由なんかありません。
そっか。なら二人で深夜勤を頑張ろう。よろしく姉さん。
私ついさっきお子様方にお部屋で遊ばないかとお呼ばれしてて。
Shannon hung her head and apologetically, gazing at Canon uncertainly. Canon didn't try to meet her eyes and spoke curtly as he sighed. It looked like he didn't plan on indulging his sister.
ダメだよ。深夜勤を仰せつかってる。それに僕たち家具には遊びのお誘いは必要ない。わかるね？
そんなことわかってます。
Shannon's shoulders drooped slightly. She had already experienced that Canon, a stickler for rules, would say something like that, and she seemed a little discouraged. As Canon flipped through a logbook, he spoke without facing Shannon.
ならお子様方お待たせしてしまってるね。深夜勤に当たってしまったからご一緒できないと謝ってこなきゃ。行ってきなよ。
私謝ってくるね。
Shannon hurriedly stood from her seat before her brother's mood could change and flew out of the servants' room before giving a quick bow. As he watched her go, Canon took a single deep breath. Genji's voice came from beyond the screen.
カノン、私がここにいるからお前も行くといい。
源氏様、誘われたのはシャノンだけです。僕は別に誘われては。
その場にいなかったからお声をかけられなかっただけだ。言えばお前も誘われている。たまには子供らしく遊んでくるといい。
いえ、僕には必要ない行為です。人の子には遊びも必要でしょうが、僕らは家具ですから。
そうか。
姉さんだって家具です。人のふりをしたって後で苦しむだけなのに、僕はそれが分かっているから人に近づきたくないだけなんです。
Genji did not say anything after that. After a while he stood up and used a pot of hot water to make powdered cocoa, serving some to Canon as well.
そりゃ本当かよ。そりゃ知らなかったぜ。
バカ、声が大きいぜ。マリアが起きちゃうだろ。
Butler was so surprised that she yelled obnoxiously and scattered his cards everywhere. His voice caused Mario to turn over once, but she soon fell back into a deep sleep. Jessica gave him a jab and he lowered his voice.
いや、しかし言われてみれば確かにそれっぽい雰囲気はあったんだよな。はあ、なるほどな。ジョージの兄貴がな。
George couldn't be seen anywhere in the room. A short while ago, when Shannon came into the room, George suddenly he said he'd forgotten something in the mansion and needed to go back and get it. Shannon said she would guide him, just as he had on the way to the guest house, so the two departed together.
いや、昔からそれっぽい気配はあったんだぜ。好きなものを聞いてきたり、趣味を聞いてきたりさ。単に関心を持つだけにしてはどうもなんて思ってたらよ。
そういや、昔っからジョージの兄貴はシャノンちゃんにやたらと優しかった気がするぜ。なるほどな。
there would be the two people who need to be separated on the second twilight, I think. Or candidates for that group of people.
天気予報によると今夜が一番ひどいみたい。明日いっぱいも止まないらしいけど、もう少しマシになるそうだよ。
そうですか。では明後日までは船は来られないかもしれませんね。ジョージ様の月曜日のお勤めに差し支えが出ないか心配です。
台風が来ていることは知っていたからね。万一に備えて月曜日には予定を入れなかったから大丈夫さ。こう見えてもスケジュールは先読みできるタイプなんだ。
George puffed out his chest, acting proud. Compared to the calm appearance George had always had for the oldest cousin, he looked amusingly like a little kid. Shannon chuckled at this abrupt contrast.
さすが。やがては会社を起こされる方はしっかりしていますね。
やっぱり会社を起こすというのは大変だね。お金とかそういうのだけじゃないものがとても大事だって父さんのところで勉強していてわかるよ。会社を起こすということは城を持ち部下を率いるということ。うちの父さんは秀吉って名前だけあって戦国武将のエピソードがとても好きでね。会社経営の哲学をよくそこから語るんだ。知ってるかい？戦国最強の騎馬軍団と恐れられた武田信玄も最初は部下たちの結束がバラバラで統率力をまるで発揮できなかったんだそうだよ。
そうなんですか？なんだか意外ですね。
信玄は部下たちを結束させるため数々のリーダーシップを発揮してるんだよ。例えば戦場で武功を立てた部下に対しすぐその場で褒章を与えたり、普通こういうのは戦が終わってからまとめてやるものだからね。それを戦場の本陣の中にいながらまめにやり続け、部下の武功を素早く評価しやる気につなげたというのは非常に大きいことだよ。それから部下が病気で伏せった時には誰よりも早く駆けつけお見舞いをしたとかね。武田信玄は戦国最強の騎馬軍団を率いただけじゃない、戦国一の部下思いの人だったんだよ。
そんな方だから部下の皆さんもついてきてくれたんですね。
The truth was, Shannon had already heard the story several years ago, but whenever the discussion of his father led to this sort of topic, George would always glow like he was having a great time. So Shannon just smiled without interrupting him, urging him to continue.
確かに資本主義の世界ではお金は力で石垣の高さでもある。でもね、戦も城も自分一人じゃ成り立たない。大勢の部下に支えられ、その力を借りて初めて成立するものなんだよ。それを理解してから父さんの背中を見ると、自分がいかに未熟で父さんがどれほどの切磋琢磨をして今日を築き上げてきたかがよくわかるんだ。
ジョージ様はお父様のことをとても尊敬されているんですね。羨ましいです。
あ、ごめん。別にそういう意味で言ったんじゃないんだよ。
すみません。私も別にそういう意味で言ったつもりは。
The two of them awkwardly looked at their feet. Shannon had no parents. She'd been brought up in an orphanage owned by Kinzo called the Fukiun House. Under the guidance of Kinzo, their honorary director, the orphanage offered members who excelled a chance for an on-the-job serving experience. If their efforts met Kinzo's approval, they would be able to leave the orphanage and work as servants for the Ushiyamaya family. This was considered to be the height of honor for those who lived in the orphanage. Servants of the Fukiun house all took names of a character on while they served. So Shannon wasn't her real name. The same went for Canon. All the members of the Fukyun house were orphans. At least they were all people who separated from their parents under special circumstances. Because of this, orphans have been taught to think of each other as part of their family. That's why it seems so natural to both when Canon called Shannon his sister. And while both Shannon and Canon were working in the mansion today, there were several other servants possessing the Con character in their names, such as On, Manon, Lennon, and who often worked in the rotational section. However, there were not many servants who stayed with the Ushiromaya family for long. It was a stand for them to quit after 3 years. So you could probably say that Shannon had been working there for 10 years with a notable exception to the rule. Working as a servant for the Ushiromaya family was a heavy burden to bear, but the pay wasn't bad at all. Working for full 3 years would earn more than enough without needing to enter mainstream society. That's why, even though the orphans realized what a harsh task working for Ushiromaya family was, they still hoped to be accepted. Maybe the fact that Shannon managed to continue working for 10 years wasn't because she had more willpower than the other servants. Maybe she got stuck working for 10 years because she didn't have the courage to say she wanted to quit. Kinzo couldn't even trust his own blood relatives, and those excellent servants sent by the Fukyun house were the ones he could rely on. Because of that, Kinzo would sometimes allow them to wear the family crest as servants under his direct control, when he'd have them work close to him.
もう勤めて10年近くになるんだっけ。だいぶお金も貯まったんじゃないかい。
どうでしょう。別に私買いたいものも特にありませんし、ほんの何百万かあったってそれで残りの人生を過ごせるわけもありませんし。
目標の額があってお勤めを続けてるわけじゃないのかい。
そうですね。私はこのお屋敷以外に行くあてもありませんし、お嬢様とも他の使用人の子たちとも仲良くやれてますし、奥様には時折お叱りを受けますけど、柄の世話やお屋敷のお掃除も楽しいですし。
でもそれはシャノンちゃんのサヨちゃんの人生じゃない。
Shannon cast her eyes downward when she heard her real name. She understood what George was trying to say and felt silent.
僕は成人し、社会人になってからも勉強して分かったことがある。子供の頃、僕らが思っていたほど人生は単調で短くないんだ。
All school-age kids have certain fears they can't shake. They wondered if they'll live the rest of their life like sleepy classes after a monotonous and boring school day, spending their time in carefree laziness without anything interesting happening until it's all over. However, life's only like that for underage students. Compared to a human's life, the time they spend as students is nothing more than a blink of an eye, a period where they break through the shells of their immaturity. The inside of that shell might look hot, suffocating and boring world, but the world beyond that shell is vast and filled with limitless impossibilities.
君の人生はまだシャノンという殻の中でしかないんだ。君は自分の人生がこの生活のままずっと続いていくと勘違いしてるんじゃないかな。
それは。
Shannon couldn't deny those words. She'd been able to harbour any clear doubts about her lifestyle, and since she'd never had any hopes or goals for changing herself, she'd lazily continued living the same way she always had. And if asked whether this life was satisfying, she wouldn't have been able to nod. She may have intentionally averted her eyes from the truth. Without George's admonishment, she would have continued pretending not to notice as her real life slipped away bit by bit, neglected.
ジョージ様、私はこのままでいてはいけないのでしょうか。
いけないよ。あ、それから今ルール違反が一つあったね。
George immediately gave a strict answer, then broke into a mischievous smile. Shannon already knew what she was being chided for, and she hung her head, apparently embarrassed.
僕たちしかいないときは様はなしの約束だよ。
約束では聞けません。ですがご命令でしたら聞かないわけにはいきません。私は家具ですから。
じゃあ命令だよ。
はい、かしこまりました、ジョージさん。
As Shannon hung her head, her face red as she said George's name again, this time following it with Sam.
それでいいよ、さよちゃん。
George smiled at Shannon, no Sayo, to praise her small act of bravery. This short exchange alone made it clear how far back their relationship must have stretched. For a long while the two talked while the weather was raging but didn't even enter their thoughts. They talked about the many memories they'd built during their relationship that no one else knew about. Even every once in a while a flash of lightning would attempt to interrupt them, but this could sully neither the roses nor the time they spent blushing at each other.
So そうだ、君に見せたいものがあって。
なんでしょうか。
Are you going to propose? George, who had been speaking eloquently, suddenly started to stutter. Watching him, Shannon seemed to guess something. George timidly searched through his pocket. Something caught in the depths of his pocket, just like the stuttering George. It took a while to get out. It was a very small box covered in a deep blue velvet. The peculiar shape was enough to tell anyone that it was what was resting inside. Shannon had prepared her heart somewhat, certain beforehand that this was what he'd been planning. But even so, when she actually saw it, she couldn't avoid blushing more. George opened the small box and took out something out, and he held it for Shannon to take.
これを君に受け取ってほしいんだ。
このような高価なものはお受け取りできません。
受け取れない。
いえ、こんなもの私には過ぎていて。
さよ、これはお願いじゃない、命令だよ。この指輪を受け取ってね。
命令では。
This has gotten a bit unintentionally creepy.
従わなくてはなりません。
そうだね、いい子だよ。
Shannon, not wanting to show her bright red face, timidly accepted the ring from George's hand while staring at the ground. The ring wasn't a simple accessory. It was a notable object meant symbol since ancient times to be offered to a special woman under special circumstances. Therefore, George could offer her to take it. He could not alter anything beyond that. Anything beyond that would be a demand, not an order, but on Shannon, no, Thayo's own will.
だからここからはもう命令じゃない。さよ、明日までに言葉でない形で返事がもらいたい。わかるね。
どうすれば。
もうこれ以上は命令じゃないから、僕は君に命令はしない。でも指輪は指にするものだからね。気に入ってくれたなら好きな指につけてくれればいい。
Shannon had only pretended not to know. She already understood what he wanted her to do. But she was standing at a huge crossroads in her life.
もうこんな時間だね。今夜はこれくらいにしよう。
George turned away from Shannon, acting just a bit bluntly.
君に左手につけてほしいと命令することもできるかもしれない。君も命令されればそれに従えるという臆病な甘えがあるかもしれない。でも最後のここだけは君のサヨの意志でしてもらいたいんだ。わかるね。
はい。
だからそれが命令。今夜よく考えて明日その返事を見せてほしい。
Shannon nodded back. Today was a combination of the many days spent together. The moment certainly couldn't have come as a surprise to Shannon.
そろそろゲストハウスに戻ろうか。これ以上遅いとみんなを心配させちゃうよ。
すみません。私、その、お屋敷にいよう思い出しまして。その、お屋敷へ行かねばなりません。
こんな時間に本当かな。
George stared into Shannon's face and laughed mischievously. He definitely saw through Shannon's lie. However, when he saw how she felt, he could sort of understand that she might be so embarrassed that she wanted to be alone. So, because George realised the meaning behind Shannon's lie, he accepted it.